When we first came to this park that we played in, it's called La Loma, and it's this beautiful park. It's up on a hill. It's at the top of a hill, and it's reached by 40 steps from bottom to top. And it's shrouded in eucalyptus and oleander, and it's like this hidden, secret getaway. And you could drive right by the street level and have no idea that it's even up there. It's really that sort of separate from the rest of the community. This was, such an extraordinary place for me to hang out with Max and throw the ball around and start coaching him in t-ball. But I didn't think that it was going to be anything more than that, and I certainly didn't think it was going to end up being a book. But what happened as time went on, we discovered that this league was being looted and pillaged by the blustery dads who were running it. And this lovely park had become turf. It was being mined for money and prestige and control, and families were bailing out. Equipment was missing. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was going to inherit thousands of dollars in debt that would have to be paid off. And suddenly I began making this transition from just a parent and a coach to volunteering myself to be the commissioner, the guy who was going to sweep up all this mess. And I found myself tested in all these extraordinary and unexpected ways. My leadership, my patience, my judgment, and eventually my personal life became caught up in the operation of the league. And after a few years of this, I began to think that this rinky-dink, mom and pop, grassroots, down-home youth baseball program had actually become the defining experience of my adult life. And I want to read just a short paragraph about what it was like being the commissioner, kind of a summary of my duties during that time. The cliche of Little League, of youth sports in America, is one of lost perspective. By taking it too seriously, adults have ruined a children's game. I've begun to think that the opposite is true, that we do not take it seriously enough. Nothing in my 40-plus years has compared with the enormity, with the complexities or the sensitivities of trying to keep La Loma afloat. Nothing has done as much to test my judgment. Nothing has made me feel so responsible for so much beyond my control. Being commissioner means being La Loma's publicist, accountant, MC, detective, psychologist, chef, graphic designer, janitor, landscaper, paramedic, choreographer, and justice of the peace, one whose standing is based largely on the absence of anyone else willing to assume the office. No matter how many hours I put into it, and for someone who putatively holds a real job, I've put in more than I should ever admit. There is always a parent to soothe or to scold, a protest to weigh, a schedule to juggle, a roster to scrutinize, a balance to collect. The league's operating budget eventually topped $50,000 a year, and with our various fundraisers, I probably handled well over twice that amount. And I mean handle, my fingers growing sooty and metallic as I counted piles of cash atop my bed like a dope man, paranoid and exhilarated. I've disqualified players and expelled spectators, prosecuted thieves and mediated divorces, sopped up muddy fields and administered first aid with Mexican popsicles from our snack bar. I know which coaches have prison records. I know which coaches bounce checks. I know which coach is screwing around with the shortstop's mom, and which coach has crippling headaches from a bullet lodged in her skull. Like natural disasters and family vacations, Little League brings out the best and the worst in people. It supplies the trials that reveal our inner workings. Because every fiasco ended up in my lap, because I wanted to be the kind of person who could be counted on to remedy each one, I probably have a more ambivalent view maybe darker, maybe just more realistic of what that portends. So the real question then becomes, why would I do this? Who would take on all these headaches and obligations and responsibilities? And there's two answers to that. I mean, there's I think in every story we tell, everything we do, there's an external motive and there's an internal motive. And the external motive is that this league had been stomped on and trampled, and if somebody didn't step in, we weren't going to have baseball in our community anymore, and that didn't seem acceptable to me. But the more complicated explanation is that not everything was going so perfectly well in my own life either. And it was no coincidence that I became commissioner right after my marriage had ended. And I had been, I think it's safe to say, I had been involved in somewhat of a high-risk relationship. I married an immigrant from Nicaragua who was tending bar in a little cantina in Echo Park. I used to go in there in the early 80s, mid-80s, and practice my Spanish and have a few drinks and flirt with the barmaids. And I guess it worked because it got me married. And my marriage to her ended up resulting in her green card since she was in LA without papers. And then it led to quite a large number of her family members, my in-laws and extended family, wanting to follow her up north. And I became sort of the sponsor of many of those journeys. So I had arrived in LA to start work at the LA Times, thinking, I was becoming a journalist, but for a while there I was kind of running an underground railroad between Managua and Echo Park. One of the family members that was brought up was a stepson for me, my wife's son, and he was 6 years old. Some of the more difficult material in this book for me to write, and I think probably for the reader to read, is this relationship between me and the stepson, and wanting to be a good presence in his life, thinking he's 6 years old, doesn't really know his biological father. How hard can it be to make a difference? And discovering that, I wasn't very well equipped to be a dad at that point in my life, and if he was going to accept a father, I probably wasn't the father he was looking for. I mean, who I was very alien to his experience, and he ended up sort of getting lured into the culture of the streets and gangs, which was difficult on a couple levels. Because there was this sort of ironic tug-of-war going on. I was the gang reporter for the LA Times in the early 90s. And I was writing these stories that were getting this very positive reaction, and I was earning these accolades for seeming to have this understanding and compassion of what was going on out in the streets. And then I would come home, and I'd seem to have no understanding or authority with what's going on with my stepson. And so there was this battle going on under my roof for many years that made life pretty difficult.